Hello, all you beautiful people, and welcome to or welcome back to the Voice of Reality, a podcast. I am so grateful to have you all here and to have you tuning into episode 3 with me. And I'm so excited to get into this one as well, as I know it's something that's going to help so many of you on your own journey. But firstly, how are we all and how are we feeling this week? Honestly, I feel like this week has been the longest week of the year. You know, those weeks where a Wednesday feels like a Friday and everything is literally in slow motion. I feel like I have lived 2 weeks in one and have just felt floored. But there is definitely reasons for this. I did get my period this week, so it explains a lot. Do you know when it's like leading up to your period and there's so much happening and your body is obviously going through the wars? You're emotional, there's a lot going on, you're irritated, and next thing it comes and it happens, and you literally just sit there and you're like, that just made so much sense. That past week has just made so much sense. And that was literally me this week. And it's so weird because I know what to expect, I know what goes on, but still, every single week and every month that it comes around, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like surprised by what just happened and how, like, actually my body changes, my emotions change, and just how everything goes on. Well, can I please just say how important it is to understand your own cycle? Everyone is so individual and different, and it is so important for you to understand your own body, your own cycle, and what goes on, the power it gives you over the month and over what you can do and how you feel on a week to week base. It is crazy. I will, of course, be doing a whole episode on this in itself because I would literally speak on this for days. So I'm not going to add it into this episode. We will have its own. And yes, but one thing I will say, ladies, is to just tap into that knowledge as much as you possibly can for your own individual bodies. Oh, and sorry, another thing that we need to chat about really quickly is how the price of Nike socks have soared through the roof. Since when is a 3 pack of Nike socks €20? When I went into JD the other day, my jaw nearly hit the floor. I have never paid over €12 for the 3 pack. And the other day I went in and I was up at the till and I was just like, do you know what? I cannot bring myself to pay €20 for these. So down to pennies I went and I got a 3 pack for €5, just without the little tick on them. But I was genuinely in shock. Actually was just like, I have to share this with everyone because how? Like, the cost of living really hit me in that very moment. But yes, another huge thing that happened this week for me anyway. And can I just say, I celebrate every single win. And I think it is so important for everybody to celebrate every single win, no matter how small, how big, how in between that is. You celebrate what you have done and how you've progressed. So if anyone follows me on Instagram, on Life and Gym Gear, you'll know I ran 10K this week. And even just saying that, I am beaming because obviously I haven't stopped talking about it either. And I cried about it for about 2 hours, can I just say. But when I first began the running journey itself back in January, I started with 2 km. And I genuinely thought I was going to vomit. I could barely breathe after it. And it was really, really tough. I'm not a runner girly. I never really have been. But I just set out with that goal of getting 5K. When I hit 5K, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Who knows? Maybe one day I can get 10K. When I hit 10 km yesterday, I actually felt like that was my marathon moment. It was just the best feeling in the world because it was something I never saw myself actually getting to. I knew if I kept showing up, I knew if I kept being consistent, maybe one day I would. And when I got it, I was just like, this is every single step and every single day that I've shown up for myself, showed discipline and showed like that I could possibly do it, adding up together and getting me to this actual moment. And I was just so emotional over that. So, anyone else out there that is starting running or starting anything new, please keep showing up for yourself because you are going to get to moments that you never thought you would. And it is the best feeling in the world. Do you know what else I really want to talk about? And something that is genuinely my Roman Empire, like I think about this all of the time, is people running marathons, people running 42 km. Like, I obviously ran that 10K and that was a marathon moment for me. That was such a big, big thing for me to actually get to. But how are people running 42 km? Like, I just salute it so much. I don't think I actually realized how tough and how mentally tough it is until I obviously started running and starting to kind of pinpoint goals for myself. But oh my God, how on earth are they doing it? Please, can someone tell me, do they stop? Do you walk? Like, do you have a minute to catch your breath in between? I don't know. But it just blows my mind as to how people are showing up and doing 42 km. And I am just here for it. And a big shout out to anyone that has done one, training for one, even a half marathon. It is such a phenomenal achievement. And a huge, huge shout out to one of my best friends who is doing her second marathon 42 km on Sunday. Lauren, you are amazing. And I, of course, will always be cheering you on from afar as well. So, we currently have a new segment this week, which I will be starting with. I want to introduce this in as a place, obviously, in the podcast and in each episode for you all to be able to have your questions answered and anything that you want, obviously, to be added in to be answered and for you to learn as much as possible as we go. This can be on any topic, but we just want to keep it real. So I will always have a question box up on my Life and Gym Gear Instagram page where each week you can put in your questions. I will give advice on lifestyle, training, nutrition, literally life in general, coaching, anything at all. Like it can be anything. And I will give some advice on it and just answer that question and we will keep it real. So this week on Let's Be Real, we are going to dive into a question that I get asked every single week in my messages in general. Anytime I put up a question box, anytime I ask or talk about anything to do with nutrition, this question comes up. So I think it's very important that we do dive into it, as simple as it is. And that is, should you be tracking your fruit and your vegetables? And this is honestly so simple, but I know that there are so many question marks over this. Should you track your fruit and veg when it comes to nutrition? Personally, I always say no, but this is so dependent on your own goals and your current position. If your goals are obviously a little bit more serious and very, very physique based and they're not very lifestyle based, and you're literally stepping on stage as a bodybuilder or maybe taking a very, very serious goal in a short period amount of time, there is no need to count or track fruit and veg unless you are literally doing something very, very serious. It will also very much depend on how much you eat too. So how much fruit and veg you're actually having on a day-to-day basis. Like for me, fruit and vegetables are vital to anyone's diet and everyone should be getting them in day to day. And I would never want anyone to fear them. Unless it is obviously something that you are literally bringing in heaps and bounds and truckloads on a day to day, I would not be tracking it. And let's be real, if it means you're getting more into the day to day diet, we love that and we want that. So enjoy them. I wouldn't be tracking them unless it is in heaps and bounds and you have a very, very specific goal in mind. Okay, so let's get into this week's episode. This week, we are going to be chatting about the scales, why it's so important, and to not allow them to literally dictate your entire journey. I see this all of the time. The emotional attachment is crazy. And I can promise you, this is you actually caring about your journey in the most negative way. If you cared about your journey and your personal progress as much as you cared about the number you see on a piece of plastic, you would get a lot further than ever before. You hear us coaches talk about this all of the time. It's been an ongoing issue for years upon years, and it's the reason why half of you give up before you've even began. One simple thing that has such a chokehold over so many of us is the dreaded scales. It has genuinely had us all in such a hold for so long, even myself. Growing up, my dad was, and probably still is, I don't live at home anymore, but was addicted to the scales. He probably still stands on it every day, if not every week. But this was the Bible to him and his progress. And this would make or break how his progress and what he was doing and how that went that week. For a lot of us and anyone listening, it was probably the only form of measurement to use for years. And it still is a huge form. But for years, it was all that was relied on. And it wasn't changing, or if it wasn't fluctuating, it would have us thinking that we weren't doing enough or what we were doing wasn't good enough. And all hell would probably break loose. We didn't know or have the knowledge that we have now. And that's so important to remember. that the reason why it has such a huge factor is because we didn't know any different back then. So for years upon years, this one specific form of measurement really kind of had a chokehold on us, and it's all we knew. I'd say everyone listening here has either had a relationship with the scales or seen someone around you have some sort of relationship with the scales. And the thing is, we never knew any different, and we never really realized or looked into the knowledge behind what actually goes on and what actually happens when we actually are changing and our bodies are changing. So, for years, we have been under the influence of the scales being the only point of reference for progress. It was the only thing we all used. So, I do completely understand why it is such an attachment in the world, and obviously on your own journey and on personal journeys. And I do understand why so many people find comfort with it, as it's all we've known for so long. When I was younger, I remember the trauma of standing on that piece of plastic. And it was set in stone and pounds in my house. And I don't know about anyone else, but for some reason, seeing stone and pounds on the actual, on the actual scales was so much worse than seeing, say, the number in kg. I remember being 8, 9, 10 years old and nearly weighing more, or if not the same weight as my mum. Now, to be honest, that didn't take a lot as she was always tiny. But at the time, I was obviously hitting puberty as well. I was accumulating a lot of tissue very quickly. So I was, of course, starting to gain a lot of weight at such a young age. And this was so alarming to me and so triggering at such a young age. I hated the scales in the bathroom. It used to make me feel like something was wrong with me, to be honest. The way I was accumulating this so quickly and the way my body was changing. And the reason I share this as well with you all is because a lot of the time, emotional triggers with the scales comes from a young age, and understanding this makes it a lot easier to unravel why you're so attached to it as we go forward. I'm sure you knew someone constantly standing on the scales or using it. I'm sure you've heard of Slimming Worlds and Weight Watchers, or one of those literal scamming clubs that have gone around for years, that I hope you all know just base their information off of a calorie deficit. There is no other magic to what they do. But I always thought how absolutely criminal it was that they weigh you once a week at 5 p.m. of a random day. So, of course, your bodies might fluctuate from one week to another. It might go down, it might go up, but it could have had such a long lasting impact on you when you see this fluctuate. I honestly do thank God that I just about skipped this era kind of time and when it was popular. I was just about probably 18ish when it was such a huge influence and had such a huge reign on progress and diet culture. I was probably even a bit younger than that, to be honest. I never actually experienced that side of things, but I've always heard of the stories, seen my sisters go from one to another for absolutely years. From Slimming World to Weight Watchers to Curves, there was so many of them around, and I just about dodged it. So I am very, very glad of that. But I'm also so glad that a lot of us have come out the other side of that, or else are trying to and are realizing what's going on. But the effects of these groups and what they have done to so many of us have such a long lasting kind of period and such a long lasting kind of effect in general. You start to pick up ideas and traits as you go along, and they do stick with you because it's all you know and it's what you're being taught to do and to use. You probably look up to these people in these groups, and of course, you'll think that this is what is right. Who here listening has ever been to one of these clubs or groups in general and has been weighed every week? Or maybe your weight would fluctuate from one week to the next and you'd feel absolutely awful about it and left thinking, why on earth am I doing this? And what is the point? Or worse yet, you start to just give up on it and give up on yourself. This is still happening to this day, and the scales are still dictating so many of our journeys and so much progress in such negative ways. And what I want to unravel is why it's not always the most accurate measurement to use, and also how we could use it to actually help us better. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's a very useful tool. Sometimes I even still use it, and sometimes I ask my clients to use it, but not if you have a toxic relationship with it and not if you're using it in a poor way. So let's get into the science behind it all and why it's become such a dominant tool when it comes to progress itself. First things first, the scale measures weight, not body fat. So always remember that. So if you've lost or gained some sort of weight on the scales, that isn't always actual body fat. So if you go up a kg on the scales, it could be water, liquid, it could be any sort of retention. It's not always going to be the body actually accumulating tissue. If you're in a calorie deficit, you should be losing weight per se. We are taking in less calories than we are putting out, and this means our bodies will lose weight. The science is if you are in a calorie deficit, you are losing weight or body fat, and I absolutely second this. The science is that the scales should move in some sort of way. If you're in a calorie surplus and you're eating more, then it will more than likely go up. But science doesn't take into consideration how much our bodies actually change and how much they fluctuate, and how something so small can have such a huge impact on our weight, especially as women. As women, it's a completely different story. Our bodies are literally made for specific reasons, and with that comes a lot of changes from day to day, week to week, and month to month. There will be an episode on this, as I've said, and I do promise that I will dive into this hugely and a lot more. But just for now, we will tip into it as we go. Firstly, why is the scales actually setting you back in your journey? And it honestly is so simple. If you have a look at people who used a scale, you would see that they would probably get disheartened very quickly. Some weeks it may work in their favor, and that's absolutely amazing. But then there's other weeks or times of the day that it won't. And this sends a triggering alarm to your brain that automatically says, this isn't working, and what's the point? And you end up giving up or stopping, and you just don't put in any effort anymore. All because of an insignificant number on a piece of plastic. Then you have the other side and people who don't use a scales every week or every day. And these people are the people who are showing up for themselves and taking action regardless of what a piece of metal tells them. They're not allowing themselves to get triggered or fall off track because of a number, and they are consistently doing what they need to do each and every week. This consistency week after week is what puts them miles ahead of the crowds. The lack of self-doubt, the lack of triggering thoughts from the scales is what allows them to keep going and to see changes in different ways and forms that has nothing got to do with numbers. I see it all of the time as a coach. I've helped hundreds of women, and nearly 98% of the time, there's a toxic relationship with the scales from the get-go. And this toxic relationship looks something like this. Standing on the scales once a week, not seeing a change or seeing it fluctuate upwards, giving up as soon as you see this, getting upset, stopping or never continuing, and then ending up in a constant stop-start cycle because of this. For me as a coach, I want to show you how to get out of this cycle, how to rewire your thoughts and beliefs through knowledge and education of how to see results differently and what actually matters on your journey. Another thing I see a lot is people absolutely starving themselves just to see the scales drop. And then as soon as it might rise slightly, they think something's wrong. But the fact is that your body needs food and fuel. It's not getting this obviously through starving yourself, and it will end up then storing water and food as time goes on. Your body needs to survive, and it will go into survival mode if you are starving yourself and not giving your body the food and fuel it needs. This is how a lot of toxic relationships with food may form, as this can start a constant cycle of not eating enough. Then you might see small results, but then because you're not fueling your body correctly, these results might fade as you start to store more, obviously, food or tissue or water, and you see the scales maybe rise slightly, and then you give up, you start binging on foods, and after going back and forth constantly, there is a toxic relationship then formed. And the scales is actually such a huge factor in a lot of food and diet disorders in general. As I've said, we have been doctored to literally believing the scales and not knowing anything else and just relying on that solely and completely. So, honestly, I do understand why this is happening, and I do understand why so much trust is placed on this object, as it's all we've known. But imagine placing all of your beliefs and trust on one piece of plastic and on a few digits. Imagine ignoring all of your own thoughts, all of the facts, all of your feelings, and imagine giving up on yourself and never getting after your goals because of a small square on the floor. But that will not be happening after this episode. Trust me. Okay, so let's get into what actually happens each day, week, and month to our bodies and how we can fluctuate with just standard day-to-day living, and how this obviously is hugely, hugely of benefit to females. But obviously, of course, we will go into female and male, and a lot of this information can go for both if you do want to share it. So, first and foremost, we fluctuate every minute of the day. When we go to the toilet, if we are retaining any water, if we sweat a lot, if we're in a hotter climate and obviously we are warmer and our blood is pumping quicker and we're sweating in training, there is so many different things that causes fluctuations in the smallest sense. Literally waking up, going to the toilet can cause it. Obviously shedding a lot more water weight with sweating, or you could actually retain some water if you aren't drinking enough, if you've had saltier foods, and just a lot of different things as well. Different scales can also show different numbers. So please do not jump from scale to scale, because it will show different numbers and show you different results. You could have a medical issue that is causing fluctuations. There can be obviously ups and downs here and certain issues that this might cause. So please always be careful. Your sleep and stress are huge when it comes to the scales and how it works. If your sleep is off, you will retain water and you will actually feel a little bit more bloated or have a little bit more phlegm around the body. That, of course, the scales will show this. If your stress is high, you also retain water and you'll have a higher level of cortisol in the body as well, which is a stress hormone that can accumulate body fat. And of course, the scales can also show this. Water is huge when it comes to the scales and the retention of water. And obviously, if there's excess, if there's not enough, your body can retain water at any time of the day, any day of the week. And this, obviously, what I would always say is to make sure you're actually hydrating yourself as much as possible, because more is obviously better, as it will actually flush out any of excess retention. Salty foods can cause water retention. Extra carbohydrates on a day can cause water retention. And let's not get into alcohol, okay? If you are drinking alcohol, this is huge. Alcohol can obviously cause a lot of water retention. Absolutely. That is probably the number one thing that you will see with fluctuations on the scales. But alcohol can also stop fat burn for up to 72 hours, as it does have a huge effect on the body and it is a toxin. So the body will literally spend all of its time trying to get rid of this instead of actually doing what needs to be done. And your metabolism will find it literally fighting for its life after drinking alcohol in general. It will also have a huge effect on the body with regards to stress, and it will start to kind of hold and retain a lot of water or any needed minerals in this period of time until it's actually kind of gotten rid of from the body. Now, alcohol is another thing that we will deep dive into in a different episode, but just for now, that is just how it affects the scale weight. Hormones. Ladies, this is crazy what happens to us from week to week within our bodies. We are literally superhuman. Let's take, for example, myself. I made sure to take my weight consecutively the past 14 days as I knew my period was coming. So for about a week, I was 66.2 to 66.4. So small fluctuations, but nothing drastic. I was holding in at an average at 66.3 kg. The day before my period arrived, I jumped up to 67.2 kg. I went up a whole kg on the scales simply because my body was going into survival mode, knowing what was going on, retaining what it needed to retain, and it was very, very stressed. Think of the amount of stress your body goes through when it is going into day one of your cycle. So it is huge, and it is so important to know how much your body fluctuates day to day just from hormones alone. You can hold up to 4 kg of water weight during your period week alone. But as well as this, your body's under a lot of stress and you may feel very bloated. But it is not body fat, and this is something to always remember. Body fat and body weight are two different things. And if you hop on the scales on your period or any kind of day, our hormones change all of the time, and you see you jump up drastically, literally in the matter of one day, that is more than likely some sort of retention and some sort of like minerals or liquid being retained in the body rather than an accumulation of body fat and tissue. So always remember that. Another key topic that we need to discuss is actual muscle mass and body composition, and how drastically this obviously changes when we're training and exercising. And this is why things can fluctuate so much when your body composition actually changes. You may see muscle mass on your body, and you may see your body change in different kind of shapes and sizes, but the scales might not move. And the thing is here, muscle mass weighs more than actual body fat. So you may see that your weight could go up slightly or it might stay the same, but you will appear smaller because muscle mass takes up less room on the body. So the scales might stay the same, or you might even go up because muscle mass does weigh more. But because it takes up less room on the body than body fat does, your shape and composition will appear smaller and will change. For me, this is a huge reason why I don't use the scales anymore. It's better for my own mindset, of course, because I know that muscle mass is accumulating and it's not going to be the most accurate tool. I also have more knowledge, so I know not to let it dictate my journey as I'm aware of things and how everything works and just how much my body changes every single day. One thing I see a lot of the time when it comes to weight and progress is that people tend to always live in the past and what they used to weigh. It is always something I see of people saying, I used to be this size, or I used to weigh this, or 4 years ago I was this or that. And you need to understand that you are not the same person anymore. So comparing your body right now and what it is at the minute to your body of 4 years ago and when you were 7 kg lighter will never benefit you or your current goals and situation. Being stuck in the past will not help your future. You live a different life, you have different goals, and you are a whole different person with a different routine. Also, I really hate to break this to you, but your metabolism changes with every aging year. And it will always change every single year that we do grow, and with all of the different things that come with lifestyle and that come with the routine that we obviously create as we obviously grow. It's so important to realize as well that your mindset behind the scales is what's damaging your progress. You are giving so much power to something that doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of it all. It is not the scales that's going to wake up every day, go to the gym, do what needs to be done, and be consistent. It is you. If you took 90 days, 12 weeks, 3 months, and gave it all without looking at the scales, I promise you would feel the best version of yourself ever. And you would never need to look at the scales to feel this. You'd feel fitter, you'd feel stronger, you'd be more confident in yourself, you'd see physical changes, your energy levels would be higher, your sleep would be better, and your stress levels would be significantly lower. And guess what? You didn't stand on that piece of plastic once to feel these things change. And this is why it's so important to step away and not allow this to control you and your journey. What I really, really wanted to do here was show you how important it is to not rely on one singular method, but it is important to detach yourself from the scales. But I also want to show you how it is obviously used properly if it's something that needs to be done. I think a lot of the time what happens is people use the scales in a way that is a very negative impact to them and their mindset is disrupted. But if you do use it in a correct way and just use this as a form of data, it can be beneficial in ways. So, what I would normally do with any clients or with myself, if I wanted to get an accurate kind of scale weight, I would take my weight every single day at the exact same time. I would normally say to wake up before you even go to the toilet, drink a sip of water, or eat a morsel of food. I would stand on the scales and take that number. You want to get the average of your body weight at the exact same time every day over a period of 7 days. I would not be doing this every single week of the month because obviously that is how you get very kind of attached and it can get toxic. I would do it for 1 week of the month and make sure that you're getting an accurate average and then go off of this. That you have that average 1 week every month and you know what's going on and you can see what is fluctuating. But please do not do this the week of your period. You will just put yourself in a bad mood. Make sure it's kind of like the same week every month that you're doing it. And I would normally say to do it the week after your period. So probably starting the day of your last bleeding day. I would go for this and I would do this method. It just makes sure that you're getting an accurate representation of how your body is going and how you're fluctuating, and you're getting an average instead of one random day, one random time. Okay? Please always ask me any questions and reach out if there is anything that you ever want to know about this. And please know that there is also so many other ways of monitoring your progress on your journey, such as taking progress photos, which are absolutely amazing. You actually get to see your changes and you can visualize what's going on and you can see how your body composition is changing. Your measurements each week. You could as well take your body fat percent. I don't use this personally, and I don't use it with clients either, but it can definitely help. You can look at things like your energy level, your sleep, your stress levels, how you're feeling in your fitness levels, your strength levels, your clothing, and your sizes. And you can also start to journal and express how you feel on a day-to-day basis. The thing is, the scales isn't what's found to be the most damaging in your journey. It's actually the mindset behind the scales itself. It's the feeling of shame and guilt if you don't see what you want to see. And this feeling takes its toll over time and affects you hugely when it comes to your progress and goals. You start to question what you're doing and then you give up. Then you have an awful perception on fitness and nutrition and just your journey in general and trying to better yourself. All because of the shame and guilt you associate with it because of the relationship you have with using the scales. It's your attachment and relationship with this piece of plastic that's causing you harm. And it's what's having a toxic relationship and toxic kind of emotional state over the scales that's going to hold you back and never allow you to get to where you want to go. But if you switch this to using the scales as a tool for success and using it as data in your journey, it makes a hell of a lot of sense and it makes a hell of a lot less daunting and terrifying as you go. And it also allows that feeling of guilt and shame to disappear from your own journey and you actually get to enjoy it. The scales is just a number. It's just a fraction of what goes on. And after understanding the science and fluctuations of all of this, I really hope you realize that you shouldn't be relying on it alone. The scale weight does not matter. But what does matter is how you show up for yourself, how consistent you are, and the actions you take towards your goals. Please remember this. Showing up day after day and ticking your boxes consistently is what will get you on top of that mountain, not some digits on the floor. I hope this episode has helped at least one person out there. And if you've gotten this far and are still listening, thank you so much for tuning in and simply being here. Don't forget to tag, comment, and share, as always, as I love to see you all and I love to thank you and give you that virtual hug. And if there is any feedback, please always just send me a message or let me know, as all is welcome. If you have any questions on this episode, please always just drop a DM, just give me a text and let me know, as I am always so happy to help. But let me leave you with this. There is going to be times when you feel like you want to give up and like you want to quit. And some weeks you may feel like you haven't made any progress at all. But through the actions of showing up and doing what needs to be done, you will always succeed, regardless of what anything else says. If you are showing up, you are going to get there. And if there's low days or days that you doubt yourself, or simply days you just don't believe in what you're doing, please know I'm over here believing in you, and I'm over here rooting for you.